Outriders is a game that flew completely under my radar up until its release. The concept of it is intriguing enough. Humans boned Earth harder than Chris Brown hit Rihanna, so y'all have to find a new planet for humanity. But that planet turns you into an X-Men, but before you get to see all your cool powers, you get put into cryo sleep, and then when you wake up, everybody's back at each other's throat, Mad Max style. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna play the demo, see what it's like. And when I first started playing, I was drawn to humanity's interaction with this new planet that they found themselves on. It starts off pretty like optimistic. You got new land to travel, a couple of new creatures here and there, but it doesn't start off too crazy. But then something called an anomaly shows up, and all of a sudden humanity's back to where they were on Earth, except this time the planet isn't dying, the planet's killing off humanity. Now, the storm or anomaly isn't killing all humans. Some of them are left with cool wizard powers, and they're known as altered. And some of them aren't left with powers, but just vision, like this crazy lady. And you see her in your dreams when you're in cryo sleep, and then you wake up, you see her, and it turns out it's your best friend's surrogate daughter now, but we'll get to that later. Anyways, when you are able to like pass the prologue and that's all done, you get to walk around, and there's notes and stuff flying around, and a bunch of NPCs just talking about stuff. And every now and then I would just sit and listen to them talk about just like, oh, back on Earth and stuff like that, and how it would be different from how it is now. And you'd also have the ones who have no recollection of Earth and were born here on this planet, and so they don't really know anything about Earth, and they don't care, honestly.
You guys crazy?
Hey, you're altered. No chance you could turn lead to gold, is there?
Back on Earth. Back on Earth. That. No one remembers that shit, old man. It's over.
Now, they're not too complex conversations, and they repeat themselves often in several different places, and it gets repetitive fast. So, just at the first glance, they're alright, but then they get old when you're just trying to walk around and you just back on Earth this, back on Earth that. Like, okay, we get it. You don't like that the old timers talking about Earth. This, along with a couple other things, kind of breaks the immersion quite a bit, because there's also NPCs whose animations don't show up at all. Like this historian lady, I don't know if it's like my fault or something, but every time I would turn an artifact into her, she just didn't move her face at all. It was just her body, and it felt very, and the movements of her body didn't feel realistic whatsoever. And other times there would be an NPC who finished what their sentence was, and then their mouth keeps moving with no dialogue to accompany it. And when it comes to the line delivery of said lines, most of the time it's fine. Like, it's not like terrible. I've seen worse.
I didn't order anything.
Only thing we serve. You look like you need it. If you're here to shop, feel free to browse my goods.
But there'll be moments where it just is bad. It's mostly with the main character. Like, when he's roaming around the open world and he's like, you find a note, his response is,
Some writing here.
and it just feels so forced. Now, in the open areas, when the main character's not talking about, this is a journal, the gameplay is alright. It's nothing extraordinary, and it's not much that I haven't seen before, but it serves its purpose at least. The combat can be inconsistent, at least from what I was experiencing. There were times where enemies would like push me and actually like challenge me to keep moving, where they'd throw grenades and stuff. Other times they would just sit and wait for me to pick them off one by one. And there would also be times where the enemy they vault over something and they disappear, so I can't track them. Then there were some enemies that managed to hit me with guns that you shouldn't be able to hit with that range. Like, take this clip for instance right here. I don't have any sound indication, just a visual red that's showing me that I'm getting hit. But I don't know where I'm getting hit by, and it turns out it's the guy with the flamethrower across the gap. There's no way that he's hitting me from there, and it's not like these bullets are hitting me, because when they hit me they actually have the indication in the sound, and so I had to restart that section to get it to like function properly, and after that it worked just fine. But it still sucked having to restart an encounter in order to give myself the fair fight. Now, the combat isn't all that bad when it works, because although nothing too special with like the abilities and gun shooting, there is some sense of accomplishment when you do overcome an encounter that you've been dying repeatedly to, because the way that you heal in the game isn't through health packs or anything, it's through kills and using your abilities. Like with my class, the Demolisher, or something like that, I forget what he's called. We'll call him Rock Boy. So with Rock Boy, he gets extra health for being in close quarters with people and killing them. And then I also have the ability of Impalement, which sends a giant rock spike through a man's, chest cavity. And if it kills them, they'll be on that spike, and that spike will regenerate my health the longer it's there. So it's this risk/reward system of, okay, I need to get in close to kill some people to get more health, but I also don't feel like I have enough health to rush in there to get that kill. Now, this payoff for surviving these encounters isn't exactly as high of an accomplishment as, say, like a Dark Souls encounter, but it still feels nice when you're on a few pair of health and just barely kill off that last big, like, mini-boss, essentially, of the group. What does not help this payoff, though, is the loot that gets dropped, because sometimes you will get loot that does not support your playstyle, so you end up having to scrap it, because while it has a higher firepower, you can't use it with the class that you have effectively. With scrapping this gear, though, you get resources for the upgrading and crafting system. When it comes to this system, though, the best two aspects are definitely the rarity increase and mod switching. The rarity increase is pretty self-explanatory. It ups the rarity of your weapon, which adds a mod slot when you up a weapon to rare. Mods are where most of my time was spent when it comes to the crafting, because you can swap a mod out for any of the ones you've scrapped so far. So if you got a more powerful rifle, but you like your old rifle's mod, you can scrap that old rifle and then pop that mod into your new firearm. There are other aspects to this crafting system though, like variant swapping, where you can switch the gun from, like, say, burst fire to tactical or some other thing that can better suit how you want to use it, and it'll deduct stats from specific areas and increase them in others. And attribute raising will give a boost to just the secondary buffs that each weapon or armor has. Now, with level up though, it's pretty hit or miss, because with the rare weapons I barely could do it because it requires titanium, which is pretty rare, and you have to find other rare weapons to get more titanium to upgrade it. But you get weapons that are the max level you can carry whenever you loot it. So if I pick up a new rare weapon, my old rare weapon gets scrapped. So there are very few times where I was actually able to upgrade my rare weapons. But if there was common or uncommon weapons that I enjoyed using, I more often than not had plenty of resources to upgrade those to keep them instead of the old one. So it all depends on where the weapon and gear lies in the rarity. The crafting system overall was an okay addition. It could have been scrapped, but I'm glad it wasn't. But it does kind of ruin the whole stash thing. In fact, the stash doesn't feel like it would be important at all, even if there wasn't any crafting, because there's nothing stopping you from keeping all the favorite guns that you have just on your person, and then using them and switching them out when you really need to, because I don't want to have to go back to my stash when I get to an encounter that I need my sniper rifle for, but my sniper rifle's back at camp. And with said encounters, they do get pretty repetitive with the same enemies showing up. I haven't gotten too far into the game, but there's usually only 2 or 3 kinds of encounters. There's human encounters, which are a little harder because the humans are smarter and take more damage, and then the animal encounters, which are difficult in a different sense because they will swarm you and they have numbers if they are somewhat weaker. But there's a third one with, like, bosses and stuff that are pretty much the same for both animal and human bosses, where it's just a lot of dumping rounds at them instead of being actually challenged. You have to dodge and keep yourself out of the way, but it's just a lot of sitting and shooting and then hiding behind cover, waiting for your health to regen, and then doing it over and over again. And with these encounters, I had technical difficulties in the game itself that made it a little bit harder. There were times where my game stuttered, and so I thought I was still shooting at somebody, but for a split second it stops, so I can't tell where I'm shooting at or anything, or where somebody is, and then it cuts back a millisecond later and I'm dead. Along with this, there's some really weird defaults in the setting, like motion blur is on, which automatically I hate, and then they have the frame rates for the cinematics locked at 30 FPS, even though they could tell my system could run the ultra settings. And with the cinematics, they turned camera smoothing off, so it made it feel like I was watching a middle school fight recorded by the dude in the back of the crowd. And it wasn't even just graphical stuff and stuttering, but some of the keybinds were strange, like having shift be the original button to roll instead of like spacebar. That might just be a PC thing, but it still is weird. Overall, I've been having a good time with the game though, but it doesn't feel that high quality. Like, there's no point in the game that I felt was really like a AAA developer touch. It didn't feel like it was worth the full $60 that I paid for this thing. It feels much more like a $20 or $30 game. You know, it kind of feels like they rushed it out in some places. I mean, not nearly as bad as Cyberpunk was, but I also didn't even know Outriders existed until a couple days before its release, and I don't think many people would have minded if they pushed it back a little bit longer to give it a little bit of extra polish, a little bit extra cleaning, and just improvement of life things to make the game better, but instead it just feels bleh. So I guess the point I'm trying to make with this video is just don't spend $60 on it. Unless it gets improved to actually be worth that much, don't spend the $60 on it. Wait for a sale where it's maybe not 20 or $30, but something much more reasonable than 60. Because looking at this, it's meh. Hey guys, thanks for sticking to the end of the video. This one took a lot longer to make than I was hoping it would, but I'm pretty proud with it. I mean, it's still not that great, but I mean, yeah, they're getting better with time. Anyways, thanks for sticking around to the end of these things. It means a lot that y'all actually watch them. And if you haven't already, you know, hit the subscribe bell and all that jazz. It helps me out because hopefully we can hit 100 pretty soon, because that's driving me insane that we're 3/4 of the way there. But anyways, I'll see y'all in the next one. Bleh.